Okay, hello and welcome. Today in this lovely little entertaining video, I am going to be talking about how to structure your case. So for first speakers, this is important on how to write your speech. For second speakers, this is important for how to identify what to look for in your opponent's speech. Okay, so these are some keywords that I'm going to be defining. This will be two parts. So the first part will just be defining. Second part will be actually building and how you structure your case. So we'll definitions. All right. I will define these in chronological order. Um, I already did a first take and messed up on this video, so that's why this is defined and everything's kind of empty. All right. So definitions. This is identifying important terms from the topic and putting them into your own context for the purpose of clarity. Okay, so I will show you an example of this very soon. A little bit of an anecdote, though, to kind of hopefully explain to you why definitions are so important, is a very common practice I had with teaching new debaters how to debate was to have them attempt a very vague debate without having any form of definitions. And it was very, very badly executed. And I'm talking about the debate, not the practice, because when you don't have any definitions, the context of your debate and the parameters of your debate are not established. So, for example, one of the topics that I dealt with while teaching new debaters how to actually debate and to teach them the importance of definitions is I asked the question, should school uniforms be required in public schools? Okay, and so pretty much they didn't define any terms, so the entire debate just turned into arguing what a school uniform is. All right, and so as you can tell, that is very, very far from the actual topic at hand, which is whether or not they should be allowed. Instead, they are arguing, what is it? Okay, so defining your terms quickly and clearly establishes what exactly you are talking about, what the parameters of that you are talking about, and hopefully they leave very little to no room for different interpretations and playing around, and your opponent working around them. Okay, so you want to try and define terms. You want to define them correctly, but you also want to make sure that they work for you. So sometimes you just want to pop it into like Webster's and take the first thing that comes out. But others you might want to play around with it a bit and make something that actually works with your case. This might have an example. It's been a while since I've done this case, so I don't really remember much of the content within. But we'll look. We'll look. So let's take a look at definitions. So in this case that I actually have written myself and debated, um, actually at a national level tournament on a college campus. So let's go over it. All right. So when going over your case, you're always going to start with your topic. Okay, so if you're starting with pro, my partner and I strongly affirm the resolve. The benefits of the United States federal government's use of offensive cyber operations outweighs the harms. You want to have the topic word for word. This is kind of irrelevant when we're talking about definitions, but you want to have your topic word for word. And you want to have it worded pretty much exactly like this. For con, it's my partner and I strongly negate the resolve. What did I just do? Okay, so then what you will do is I will now provide the following definitions and framework for today's debate. Woohoo! Okay, so guess what? We're defining terms. So out of this resolution, I only saw two terms that actually needed to be defined. So in my previous video, chronologically speaking, the video that I create in the order that I do, I said that I said that you want to digest the topics. Now, everything you digest does not necessarily mean that it needs to be defined. So for example, something that I pulled out of one of the topics I analyzed in the last video was the United States, which means you are not analyzing stuff from, anywhere other than the United States as a serious point. So you don't need to define that because you just need to keep that in mind for when you're actually debating. So you only need to define stuff that establish the parameters of your debate. So for example, I defined what are cyber offensive operations and what constitutes cyber defense. Okay, now let's look at the con side, because I guarantee you I'm not going to be defining the exact same terms, and the definitions are probably going to be different. Okay, so oh, shh. Okay, so I actually didn't have any definitions for this one, which is unusual, little little off-putting and tad bit embarrassing, but all right. So, even though I kind of messed up a bit, I'm not gonna do a retake. I'm already 6 minutes into talking. My throat hurts. All right. So we've got definitions. You're identifying important terms from the topic and putting them into your own context for the purpose of clarity. Woohoo. Okay, so framework. So, okay, so what is framework? It is, I hope you can read. A short sentence or phrase telling the judge how the round should be weighed, and it sets up a quick look into what your case will be focusing on. So now this is something I can guarantee, I can guarantee that is different for pro and con. Okay, so let's look at the framework. The benefits of cyber offensive operations would prove to be more deadly and dangerous than other forms of protection. Offensive operations for the use of protection and deterrence only exist in the pro world, thus the neg must conclusively prove that cyber offensive operations, and this kind of cuts off because the word pad conversion didn't really work. But this probably wasn't the best case to use as an example, but hey. This kind of lets you look into what a framework is. Now let's look at the con, because hopefully the con is in one piece. Um, hmm, no, it is not. Okay, okay. Well, that kind of blew up in my face. Oh well, what's life without comedy? Alright, so, even though that kind of backfired and didn't really give you much insight on anything, uh, let's look at the next big thing, which is contentions. And this will be a point. Okay, so a contention is a point. Typically, your contention is a paragraph. So if you look, guess what I have at the top of every paragraph? Contention. Ready? Guess what? Wait, where's contention one? It's got cut off. Hate WordPad. Ready? Guess what? Guess what? Contention. Ready? You want to see something? Contention. You know what these are? Paragraphs. Paragraphs. Okay, so typically you're gonna have two contentions in every single case. So for my con case, since this is actually in one piece, I have, guess what? One contention, two contentions. Okay, so with contentions, you will put a phrase, okay, and this is the topic you are talking about. All right. So, for example, my contention one, defensive capabilities are more important to U.S. interests, which that phrase lets the judge know that I am talking about defensive capabilities being more important to U.S. interests. Who would have guessed? Okay, so now guess what? That's what this entire paragraph is talking about. Okay, so this is one of the most important ways to actually structure your speech. Because if you don't have contentions, you are aimlessly rambling on. Now, you may have kind of like you know, a typical speech kind of written out format, but that's not going to work in debate. So, for example, contention one, I'm talking about defensive capabilities. This entire first paragraph is talking about defensive capabilities and how they are more important to U.S. interests than offensive capabilities. This is incredibly important because guess what this counters? This is countering the original topic, okay, which is what the first speaker wants to write their speech about. Now we move on to our second contention. Guess what? I label it again. All right, now what does it say? Cyber offensive operation sets an aggressive precedent. Now, I'm going to let you take a wild guess as to what this paragraph is about. I'll give you time. All right, if you didn't get it, you're a moron. Okay, so pretty much, uh, 10 minutes. Ooh. Okay, so pretty much your contentions are your points. You want to label your contentions, and your labeling has to be true to what you're talking about. Okay, so moving on. So we have contentions. Now what is next are points. Okay, so you might be asking yourself, wait a minute, if a contention's a point, wouldn't that mean that a point's a contention? Well, my friend, you couldn't be more wrong. Okay, so your points are pretty much individual claims. So let's look at this first contention. Okay, so let's try and identify the points here. So, all right, I'm going to read this as I would as a normal debater would. Okay, so if you can't understand me, you're gonna have to get used to it because this is how people present in PFD. All right. The introduction of cyber warfare is relatively new, and with the infancy of computerized warfare, there are still numerous unknown areas in which effectiveness and devastation of a well-placed cyber attack cannot even begin to be predicted or perceived. As a result, the United States should develop itself in the art of cyber defense before it even attempts at mounting a large-scale attack against adversarial nations. According to the World Economic Forum and Lawrence Sellin of Military Times, America ranked behind China and Russia in cyber offensive capability and capacity, and I quote, both of our major adversaries, China and Russia, have placed a high priority on developing superiority within the electromagnetic battlespace with already demonstrable capabilities in electronic and cyber warfare. End quote. China specifically has dumped billions of dollars in cyber infrastructure and reconnaissance that, and I quote, cost the U.S. economy up to $300 billion annually. According to a report by Zach Cooper, a professor of economics at Yale, China has also, and I quote, demonstrated a willingness to use cyber attacks as a tool of economic coercion to pressure governments and private companies to change their policies, end quote. To circumvent this, the United States' only feasible option is to rely on a strong defensive tactic rather than fighting against a force that outclasses them in every way. Cyber operations do not always favor the offensive side in many conflicts, according to Rebecca Slayton of Harvard Kennedy School, and I quote, a focus on offensive, however, increases international tensions and states' readiness to launch a counteroffensive after a cyber attack, and it often heightens cyber vulnerabilities, end quote, meaning that when a country mainly focuses on offensive operations, it makes them significantly more susceptible to counteroffensive measures. To combat these vulnerabilities, it is best for the United States to focus on defensive measures to ensure that they are well prepared for attacks from other countries that would otherwise attempt to sabotage economic and infrastructural stability. Furthermore, Slayton even expands upon her point by saying, and I quote, improving defensive operations allows for preparation for cyber offense without taking geopolitical instability or increasing vulnerability to attack. All right, and then you would move on to your second contention, and so on and so forth. All right, so how many points did you identify? All right, now we'll do this kind of Dora the Explorer, call and response. So pretty much, let's look at it. All right, so according to the World Economic Forum, woohoo, first point. All right, so America ranked behind China and Russia. What do we know about China and Russia? Is that they are the United States' largest adversaries currently. Okay, now we have a quote. This quote backs up the point. All right, so the point is that the United States is not fit to contend in cyberspace. All right, so how do we counter this? Okay, we find evidence that says otherwise. Boom, second speaker, your job is done, partially. Okay, first speaker, if you wrote this, yeah, you did half your job. All right, so to both our major adversaries, China and Russia have placed a high priority on developing superiority within the electromagnetic battlespace with already demonstrable capabilities in electronic and cyber warfare. Boom. Okay, we have another quote to back this up. This is what second speaker is focusing on. If second speaker can't find a counter to this, second speaker leaves it. All right, now here we go. What's the next point? Guess what? It's immediately after. China specifically has dumped $300 billion annually. Or no, as billions of dollars into cyber infrastructure and reconnaissance. Okay, so now what do we see? China is much better equipped to cyberspace, which, guess what? This links to this. Hmm. It's almost like you're planning out how your points are going to work. All right, so that's what you want to do for speakers. Second speakers, this makes your job a lot more difficult, but also a lot easier depending on um, how your opponent reacts to it. And so this is kind of like a domino effect. So if you can debunk this point falls. And so if they have a point linking to this one, this point or that point falls, and so on and so forth. However, having points connected to each other makes them significantly stronger because that is what we call an impact. So an impact is something that affects you, okay? So it is an effect, okay? A point will just be a claim. Claim. Okay. So let's look at this. Okay. So, what do we see? So do we see an impact in this first point? According to the World Economic Forum and Lawrence Sullin in Military Times, America ranked behind China and Russia in cyber offensive capability and capacity. Both our major adversaries, China and Russia, have placed a high priority on developing superiority within the electromagnetic battle space with already demonstrable capabilities in electronic and cyber warfare. All right, so where's the impact? That's a trick question. There is not one. Okay, because nothing is labeled here, nothing is specifically stated that says it actually has an effect. It just says that it exists. All right, so there is no impact here. This is simply a point. However, we move on to this, and we see that China has specifically dumped billions of dollars into cyber infrastructure and reconnaissance that costs the US economy up to $300 billion annually. Okay, so let's look at this. Let's look at this point. Where's the impact? $300 billion. So we see that the impact here is we are losing $300 billion annually. Okay, how does this affect us? This deteriorates our economy, which goes into other problems. Now, you don't really want to get into those problems in a debate round, as that is severely off topic. But still, it's important to include impacts. So you can list 50 points, but if those points have no impacts, they are worthless. Okay, now you might say that this point is worthless, but it's not because it links into that one. All right, so on and so forth. All right, so before I don't really want to go through, every little sentence, and I'm sure you guys don't want to either. Um, but pretty much a good rule of thumb for making or identifying problems in a speech is that points, if standalone, should link to an impact. Okay? And impacts, okay, so what do I mean by points if standalone should link to an impact? Impacts if not linked to a point should be included in one. Okay, so what do I mean by this? Let's go back to these 2 points. All right, so we see this first point. As I stated, there is no link. Does that make this point completely worthless? Absolutely not. Do you know why? Because this directly links to an impact. Okay, so let me explain it. So we see that China and Russia are significantly better equipped. Okay, now we also see that China is sabotaging the economy. All right, so what we see here is from our contention, okay, that because we cannot compete on, yeah, because we cannot compete cyber offensively, we are being sabotaged cyber defensively and we cannot keep up. Meaning that we need to prioritize defensive capabilities. Wow, it's almost like it connects to the contention. It's insane, right? All right, so once again, according to the World Economic Forum, blah, 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 this is not worthless because it links into this. That is how you want to structure your speeches. Second speakers, this is what you want to look for. As a second speaker, you don't focus on the links, you focus on the impacts. All right? All right, so that hopefully illustrated kind of that point. Now we are going to be moving on to weights. So weights is not necessarily included in the speech. This is mainly for second speakers. and for first speakers to use in summaries. Okay, so weights are measuring two impacts by how important they are. So this is the first impact we have in the con case. Let's find the first impact we have in the pro case, which is on woohoo contention 2 because the first one got deleted. All right. So okay. Bum bum bum. Oh, look at this. Okay. So here we go. So instantly we find that the first impact on the second contention is an economic one. So here we go. So we estimate that malicious cyber activity costs the U.S. economy between 57 billion and 109 billion, compared to 300 billion. Oh no. Now you have two different sources saying the exact same thing but in different quantities. So what do we look at? That is where you compare credibility. So the U.S. Council of Economic Advisors um, versus Professor of Economics at Yale. In this case, when you are contesting evidence, this just comes down to judge preference. With U.S. Council of Economic Advisors, you can simply say that they're playing the politics. Actually, I'm not going to get into that. You're not going to encounter that. And if you do, it's your own problem. Okay. So, yeah, I don't really have a lot of impacts on the second contention. Let's. All right. This was a terrible case to use. And I'm sorry for that, but I don't like making these videos, so I'm not gonna reshoot. Alright, so pretty much, when you weigh impacts, what you want to do is you want to see, so you want to quantify how much an impact actually affects something. So, if you are talking about deforestation of the Amazon, and somebody starts talking about deforestation of the Congo, they can throw in as many impacts as they want, but they're talking about the Congo. Okay, so when you start weighing impacts, you're like, all right, deforestation in the Amazon rainforest is this. Now, my opponent was talking about the Congo rainforest, which is completely different, which means that they are completely off topic for the debate, which means that under the rules of our topic and under the rules of basic topicality, our impacts are more relevant. Then in some instances, you can even talk about stuff that's even on topic. So let's say, for example, there was a claim that there was a claim about like nuclear annihilation in regards to cybersecurity. Okay, so we weigh $300 billion versus nuclear annihilation. So you can say, okay, we can either willingly give up $300 billion a year, or every single person in the United States, and potentially even the world, can die instantly. Okay, so obviously, you obviously can tell which one is the more important impact. Okay, so that is pretty much just kind of a very brief overview of how to weigh impacts. If you have any questions, once again, feel free to ask me. There are no stupid questions, just stupid people. And 23 minutes. Oh, I'm gonna have to make another one of these. Adios.